HOA, Karen knocked down the new girl, not knowing she's a trained fighter. The sound of a chair scraping across the HOA meeting hall cut through the tense silence. Karen, the self-proclaimed queen of the neighborhood, stood up, her sharp heels clicking against the tiles like warning shots. "We don't need people like her bringing chaos here," she barked, pointing at the new girl sitting quietly in the back row. The girl, dressed simply in jeans and a soft gray sweater, looked up slowly. Her eyes were calm, too calm. But before anyone could react, Karen marched forward, her voice growing louder. "You think you can just move here, park wherever you want, and ignore the rules?" When the girl didn't answer, Karen shoved her shoulder hard enough to make her stumble. Gasps filled the room. A man dropped his coffee. The HOA president froze. The girl straightened her back, her jaw tightening just slightly. "Don't do that again," she said softly, but something in her tone made even the loudest neighbors go silent. Karen laughed. "Or what? You'll file a complaint." That's when it happened. Karen pushed again, harder this time, knocking the girl down. The entire hall erupted. Phones came out. People shouted. And as Karen smirked proudly, no one noticed the look in the girl's eyes, a flash of steady, trained focus. Because Karen didn't know, the woman she just humiliated wasn't just another new neighbor. She was a fighter, one who had promised never to fight again. Until today. Hey, everyone watching, before we dive in, tell me one thing. Which city are you watching the story from? Drop your city name in the comments below, because today's story will make your heart race. And before we start, hit that subscribe button and turn on the bell icon, because trust me, you don't want to miss what happens next. This story takes place in a quiet, picture-perfect suburban neighborhood, the kind where lawns are trimmed with ruler precision, and the HOA meetings feel more like royal court sessions than community gatherings. At the center of it all stood Karen, the self-proclaimed guardian of perfection. And then came the new girl. No one really knew her name at first. She kept to herself, moved in quietly, and didn't bother anyone. But her silence, it bothered Karen. To Karen, silence meant defiance. And defiance was unforgivable. It all began on a warm Saturday evening during a routine HOA gathering. Karen had her clipboard, her rules, and her ever-present smirk. The new girl had a soft smile and a calmness that irritated Karen beyond words. No, one knew that behind that calm face was a woman who had seen storms, a woman trained to face danger head-on. But that night, fate pushed them both onto the same path, one blinded by arrogance and the other bound by a past she tried to bury. And when they collided, the entire neighborhood would never forget what they saw next. Would you have stayed silent or fought back? The HOA community hall smelled faintly of coffee and furniture polish. It was a familiar scene. Folding chairs arranged in uneven rows, a projector screen humming softly in the corner, and the unmistakable tension that filled every HOA meeting. Karen stood at the center, clipboard in hand, like a general addressing her troops. Her golden name tag glittered under the fluorescent lights, Karen L., HOA president. Everyone knew what that meant. This was her kingdom. But tonight, something was different. There was a new face sitting quietly in the back row, near the exit door. A young woman with chestnut brown hair tied neatly into a ponytail, wearing a soft gray sweater and jeans. She had moved in just 2 weeks ago into the old Anderson house, the one that had been empty for months. Most people hadn't even introduced themselves yet. She came and went quietly, never making noise, never causing trouble. But to Karen, her very existence was trouble. Karen cleared her throat dramatically. "Before we begin," she said, her voice sharp and authoritative, "I'd like to address a matter of community conduct." Her eyes locked on the new girl. "Miss, what's your name again?" The woman blinked, her tone calm. Lena Brooks." Karen scribbled something on her clipboard with a click of her pen. "Right, Miss Brooks, I've noticed, and several neighbors have complained, that your car was parked slightly over the yellow curb near the mailbox this morning." A few people exchanged awkward glances. It was barely a few inches over, if at all. Lena gave a small, polite nod. "I'm sorry. I didn't realize it was an issue." I'll make sure it doesn't happen again. Karen's eyes narrowed. She had expected resistance, not composure. Good, she replied, tapping the clipboard. Because we have rules here. And everyone follows them. Lena smiled softly. I understand. The calmness in her voice irritated Karen even more. There was something unsettling about it, too patient, too measured, like someone used to waiting and watching. Karen turned back to the group. Now, before we move on, I'd like to remind everyone that HOA violations are serious matters. We can't have people moving in and... Karen interrupted one of the neighbors gently. She already apologized. Karen spun around. Excuse me? The man, nervous, stuttered. I just meant it's her first month here. Maybe we could, let it slide. Karen's smile was tight and fake. Oh, of course we could let it slide. And then what? Next week, we'll have people painting their fences pink and hanging laundry on balconies? No, this is how neighborhoods fall apart. Lena lowered her eyes, not wanting to make a scene. She dealt with people like this before, controlling, loud, needing attention. Her instincts told her to stay quiet. Not worth it, she thought. But then Karen took a few steps closer. I also noticed, she continued loudly, that your trash bins were left out overnight. That's 2 violations. A couple of people groaned under their breath. This was typical Karen, always looking for fight. I work late nights, Lena said calmly. Sometimes I get home after pickup hours. I'll try to manage better. Karen crossed her arms. We all have jobs, dear. The rest of us manage just fine. There was a flicker, just a flicker, in Lena's eyes. Not anger, something deeper, a quiet warning. But Karen missed it. She was too busy relishing her power. Then Karen stepped forward, closing the distance. I just hope you're not one of those people who think rules don't apply to them. Lena tilted her head. No, ma'am. I follow rules, but I don't follow insults. A murmur rippled across the hall. Karen's face flushed red. Excuse me. Lena stood, her posture still calm, voice steady. You heard me. I said I don't follow insults. I apologize for the car. I'll fix the trash schedule. That's enough. Karen's lip curled. You don't tell me what's enough in this community, young lady. The air grew heavy. Then, in one swift, impulsive motion, Karen pushed Lena's shoulder. Not hard at first, just enough to make a statement. The crowd gasped. Lena didn't stumble this time. She steadied herself, her muscles tightening instinctively, her eyes locking on Karen's face. Don't do that again, she said softly. Karen's laugh echoed across the hall. Or what? You'll call the cops. Lena's voice didn't rise. No, I'll just make sure you never try it again. Her tone sent a chill down everyone's spine. Karen, embarrassed and angry, pushed harder, this time sending Lena backward into a chair that clattered against the floor. A few people stood up, trying to intervene, but it all happened too fast. Lena exhaled, slowly. Her eyes closed for half a second, not in fear, but in restraint. She could feel it, the muscle memory, the reflexes she had spent years trying to suppress. Every part of her body was trained to react, to defend, to strike back. But she didn't. Not yet. She rose, brushing the dust off her sleeve, standing tall. Her calm presence made Karen even angrier. That's it. Karen shouted, I'm calling security. You're not fit for this neighborhood. Lena looked straight at her. You should sit down, Karen. The way she said it, low, controlled, almost compassionate, sent goosebumps through the room. Karen took a step closer, still yelling, You can't tell me what to... Lena raised her hand slowly, not in threat, but in quiet authority. You've made your point. Don't make me make mine. The room fell silent. Even Karen hesitated. And then, for a moment, their eyes locked, predator and prey, though neither knew which was which anymore. Karen saw it then, just for a second, that steady focus, that perfect stillness. Not anger. Control. The kind you only see in soldiers or survivors. Karen looked away first. Lena picked up her fallen chair, set it upright, and said, Let's finish your meeting. The HOA members sat down quietly, the tension thick, as smoke. Karen muttered something under her breath and stormed back to the front, her face pale, but her pride unbroken. But the moment she turned her back, one of the neighbors whispered, "Did you see her eyes?" That woman didn't even flinch. No one answered. They just stared at Lena, the quiet newcomer who had just faced down the queen of the neighborhood and somehow won without throwing a single punch. Outside, as the meeting ended, Lena stepped into the cool night air. She looked at the moonlit street, peaceful, calm, deceptive. She thought she'd left her old life behind. The training, the missions, the fights. But tonight, she felt something awaken. And deep down, she knew this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. The next morning, the neighborhood looked peaceful again. Sunlight glimmered over the freshly watered lawns, birds hopped across mailboxes, and sprinklers hissed rhythmically in the distance. But behind that calm surface, whispers were spreading like wildfire. By sunrise, every porch in the neighborhood had its own version of the story. Some said Karen slipped and fell on her own. Others said the new girl glared at her so intensely that she froze in place. The most dramatic ones said Lena had caught Karen's arm mid-swing, though no one had actually seen that happen. Lena, however, wasn't thinking about any of it. She sat on her porch steps, sipping coffee from a chipped mug, wearing a faded army green hoodie. Her gaze followed the neighborhood kids riding their bikes, their laughter echoing through the quiet street. It was a scene she wished she could get used to normal life, quiet mornings, peace. But peace had never lasted long for her. Inside her small house, everything was neat and organized, too organized. Her shoes were aligned by type, her kitchen knives stacked in precise order, her curtains trimmed to reveal every exit and window angle. It was the kind of order that came not from habit, but from training. On the corner of her mantel sat a framed photo, a younger version of Lena in uniform, standing beside her late father, a decorated army officer. Her eyes in the photo were bright, confident, unscarred by what she'd seen since. She whispered under her breath, "You'd tell me to walk away again, wouldn't you, Dad?" The quiet answer came not from the picture, but from her own heart. "You can't stay invisible forever." Just then, a knock sounded at her door. She opened it to find an older woman, Mrs. Hines, clutching a casserole dish and looking sheepish. "Sweetheart, I just wanted to drop this off," she said. Welcome to the neighborhood. I heard what happened last night." Lena smiled softly. "Thank you, ma'am. You didn't have to." "Oh, nonsense," Mrs. Hines interrupted. "Karen's mouth has been running wild again. Don't let her scare you off. Half of us can't stand her." Lena chuckled faintly. "I'm not easily scared." Mrs. Hines gave her a knowing look. "That's what I figured." When she left, Lena closed the door and sighed. For a moment, she allowed herself to feel something she hadn't in years, warmth. Someone standing on her side. But that feeling was short-lived. Across the street, Karen stood at her window, peering through her blinds. Her jaw tightened when she saw Mrs. Hines chatting happily with Lena. "So, she's already making friends now?" Karen muttered. She grabbed her phone and dialed a number. "Cindy? Yeah, it's me. Did you hear about the incident? I'm filing a formal complaint. That woman's dangerous. I swear she nearly attacked me." "Karen," Cindy sighed, "half the neighborhood saw you shove her." Karen's tone turned icy. "And that's exactly why I need to control the story before she does. I'm the HOA president. People listen to me." That afternoon, Karen made her move. She walked to Lena's driveway, holding her clipboard like a weapon. Lena was kneeling by her front garden, planting marigolds. She didn't look up when she heard Karen's footsteps. "Morning," she said quietly. Karen's lips twitched. "Morning. I'm here to discuss your incident at the meeting." Lena brushed dirt off her hands. "Incident?" "Yes," Karen replied, crossing her arms. "I've spoken to several witnesses who said you were threatening. The HOA can't have a violent person in our community." Lena stood up, her calm expression unchanged. "I didn't threaten anyone." Karen smiled tightly. "That's not what I'll be writing in my report." Lena's eyes darkened. "You're wasting your time, Karen." Karen took a step back, slightly unnerved by her tone. "Excuse me?" "You heard me," Lena said, stepping closer now. If you want to play politics, go ahead, but don't play them on my lawn. For a moment, their faces were inches apart, one filled with arrogance, the other with cold restraint. Karen felt a chill crawl up her spine. She turned sharply and left, muttering, "You will regret this." Lena watched her leave, heart heavy. She hated confrontation. Not because she feared it, but because she knew what she was capable of if pushed too far. That night, as rain began to fall softly outside, Lena sat in her dimly lit living room, flipping through an old notebook. Pages filled with tactical drawings, hand-to-hand combat notes, and faded photographs from her training days. She hadn't opened this in years. One photo made her pause, a picture of her and her best friend, Maya, both in military fatigues, arms slung around each other. She remembered that mission, the one that went wrong. The explosion. The screams. The reason she left everything behind. She whispered, voice breaking, "I promised I'd never fight again." But fate had a cruel sense of humor. The next morning, as she walked to her mailbox, she found an envelope tucked inside, stamped with the HOA seal. Inside was a letter. Notice of violation. You have been found in violation of the HOA Code of Conduct, Section 3A, threatening behavior. Immediate attendance required at tomorrow's disciplinary meeting. Failure to comply may result in eviction proceedings. Lena exhaled slowly, folding the paper neatly. She'd expected this. Karen wasn't letting go. Across the street, Karen watched from her window, a satisfied smirk spreading across her face. "Let's see how brave you are now," she whispered. But what she didn't know, what no one knew, was that Karen had just crossed a line far more dangerous than she realized. That evening, Lena received another visitor, Officer Dan Richards, a retired cop and longtime neighbor. He stood on her porch, hat in hand. "Hey, Lena, just wanted to give you a heads up. Karen's been spreading rumors, says you've got a violent record or something. Folks are starting to talk." Lena's brow furrowed. "Figures. She's good at that." Dan studied her face. "I did some checking on my own. Military, huh?" Lena froze. "How'd you?" He smiled faintly. "Don't worry. I'm not judging. Just saying, people like Karen don't understand that some of us fight so they can live comfortably enough to complain." Lena's lips curled into a sad smile. "Thanks, Dan. Be careful," he added. "She's planning something bigger. I can feel it." As he left, Lena leaned against her doorway, thinking about his words. She looked out at the quiet street, sprinklers still ticking, kids still laughing. But to her, it now looked like a battlefield waiting to erupt. She walked back inside, took off her hoodie, and opened the small wooden trunk by her bed. Inside lay a pair of worn military gloves, a folded patch with her unit insignia, and a letter sealed with a faint smear of dried blood. She stared at them for a long moment, then whispered, "I'm done hiding." Outside, thunder rumbled faintly in the distance. The calm before the storm was finally breaking. The following afternoon, the HOA hall buzzed with tension. Folding chairs creaked, the fluorescent lights flickered, and the air felt heavier than usual. Word had spread that today's meeting wasn't just about community updates, it was about discipline. Karen stood confidently at the front, papers in hand, her expression full of smug satisfaction. She wore her royal blue HOA uniform shirt, perfectly pressed, with golden trim shining under the ceiling light. Her posture screamed control. Behind her, a banner read, "Community Order and Conduct Meeting." Lena walked in quietly, dressed simply in jeans and a light denim jacket. Her steps were calm but deliberate, every movement measured. She had spent years learning how to read a room before even saying a word. And this room was filled with judgment. Karen immediately straightened. "Ah, Miss Brooks, glad you decided to join us," she said, her tone dripping with mock politeness. Lena gave a faint smile. "Wouldn't miss it." Karen motioned toward an empty chair near the front. "Please take a seat. I'm sure this will be enlightening." Lena didn't sit. Instead, she leaned lightly against the back of the chair, arms folded. "Let's get this over with." The crowd murmured. They weren't used to anyone defying Karen in her own domain. Karen began reading from her notes. On the evening of November 5th, during our scheduled HOA meeting, this individual engaged in aggressive and threatening behavior toward a board member, namely me. She displayed intimidation tactics, raised her voice, and caused emotional distress to multiple attendees. Lena's eyes didn't waver. You mean when you shoved me twice? Karen's cheeks flushed, but she kept her voice steady. That's not how witnesses described it. At that, an older man in the second row, Mr. Jenkins, cleared his throat. Actually, Karen, I was there. You did push her. A ripple of whispers spread across the room. Karen glared at him. Excuse me, but this is an official hearing, and You also called her a threat? Another neighbor interrupted, because she didn't argue with you. That doesn't make sense. Karen slammed her clipboard on the table. Enough. This is my meeting. The room fell silent again. Lena finally spoke, her voice calm but firm. Karen, you've been using your title to bully people for years. You fined retirees for lawn lengths, banned kids from playing in driveways, and humiliated anyone who dares question you. But last night wasn't about rules. It was about control. Karen's jaw clenched. You think you can come here and lecture me? Lena took a slow step forward. No, I'm not here to lecture you. I'm here to remind you, bullies don't get to hide behind paperwork forever. Karen tried to laugh it off, but her voice trembled slightly. Oh, really? And what makes you think you can talk to me like that? Lena's gaze was unwavering. Because I've faced people 10 times worse than you and lived to tell about it. That line hung in the air like thunder. A few people looked between them, curiosity sparking. Karen blinked rapidly, her confidence starting to crack. What's that supposed to mean? Before Lena could answer, the double doors swung open. Officer Dan Richards entered, his badge glinting faintly under the fluorescent light. Sorry to interrupt, he said. Heard there was a meeting about a community dispute? Karen's face turned pale. Officer, you weren't invited. I'm not here as a cop, Dan replied. I'm here as a witness. Gasps filled the room. Dan turned toward the group. I was outside when this incident happened. I saw Karen shove Miss Brooks twice, and I also saw Lena do nothing in return. She showed restraint that most people wouldn't have. Karen's voice trembled. You can't prove. Dan held up his phone. Actually, the cameras on my house picked it up. Want me to play it? The color drained from Karen's face completely. Lena didn't move. She just let the silence do its work. But just as the crowd started murmuring again, Karen snapped. You think you can embarrass me in front of my community? You don't belong here. She stormed toward Lena, jabbing a finger toward her chest, and that's when instinct took over. In one smooth, fluid motion, Lena sidestepped, caught Karen's wrist, and twisted just enough to redirect her momentum. Karen stumbled, nearly falling forward, but Lena caught her by the arm and gently guided her back to balance. The entire room froze. No punch, no shove, just complete, effortless control. Lena released her and stepped back calmly. See, Karen? That's what self-control looks like. Karen stared at her in shock, rubbing her wrist. What are you? Lena exhaled softly. Someone who's tired of fighting but still remembers how. Dan spoke up, his voice filled with quiet respect. Lena Brooks served 10 years in the U.S. Army as a close combat instructor. She trained soldiers and protected civilians in more ways than any of us ever will. A stunned silence swept through the hall. Karen looked around desperately. She's lying. She's manipulating all of you. But the eyes in the room had changed. They no longer saw Karen as the queen of the neighborhood. They saw her for what she truly was. Karen, Mrs. Hines said quietly from the back, "You owe this woman an apology." Karen spun toward her. "Excuse me? I don't owe her anything." But her voice was cracking now, panic rising in her chest. Lena took one small step forward, her tone soft but steady. "You do, Karen. Not to me. To yourself. Because somewhere along the way, you started mistaking fear for respect." Karen's eyes welled with tears, a mix of anger and humiliation. "I'm not your enemy," Lena continued, "but if you keep going down this road, you'll lose everything that matters." Karen stared at her, speechless. The crowd remained silent. No one dared interrupt. Finally, Karen looked away, her shoulders trembling. Without another word, she dropped her clipboard, turned, and hurried out of the hall. The sound of the door slamming echoed, like an ending. For a long moment, no one moved. Then, slowly, applause began, soft at first, then louder, rising until the whole room was clapping. Lena stood still, humbled, eyes slightly downcast. She hadn't wanted applause. She only wanted peace. Dan placed a hand on her shoulder. "Looks like you just brought some order to this community, the right kind." Lena smiled faintly. "I didn't fight her, Dan. I just stopped her from hurting herself any further." He nodded. "That's what strength really is." As the crowd began to disperse, Lena stepped outside. The air was crisp, the clouds beginning to part. The storm had broken. For the first time since she'd moved there, she felt something she hadn't felt in years, belonging. But deep inside, a thought lingered. Karen wasn't the type to stay quiet for long. And somewhere in the back of her mind, Lena knew this wasn't the end. It was just the first round. For 2 whole days, the neighborhood couldn't stop talking. Karen's humiliation at the meeting had become the latest suburban legend. Some neighbors laughed about it in secret, others tried to stay neutral. But everyone had picked a side. Karen's blue HOA shirt, once a badge of authority, had turned into a symbol of arrogance. Even the mailman avoided eye contact when she came out to collect her letters. She could feel it, the whispers, the judgment. But humiliation didn't soften her, it made her angrier. That night, as she sat alone in her immaculate living room, Karen scrolled furiously through her phone. Then she had an idea, one so twisted she smiled. "Let's see how perfect you are, Miss Brooks," she muttered, typing Lena Brooks' military record into a search bar. At first, nothing came up, but then she found an old newspaper clipping, a story from 6 years ago. The headline made her gasp. "Army instructor involved in combat operation gone wrong. 1 casualty reported." Her fingers trembled as she zoomed in. There was a photo, Lena in uniform carrying another soldier through the smoke. The article explained that she'd been part of a classified rescue mission overseas that had ended tragically. Though cleared of wrongdoing, the emotional toll had led to her honorable discharge. Karen grinned wickedly. "Oh, Lena, I just found your weakness." The next morning, as Lena walked to the corner cafe, she felt the shift. Conversations paused when she passed by. Parents pulled their kids closer. Even Mrs. Hines gave her a look that wasn't quite the same, pity mixed with fear. She knew something was wrong. When she stepped inside the cafe, she saw it on the community board, a printed copy of the same article. Someone had highlighted the words "Combat Operation Gone Wrong" in red marker. Lena froze. Her breath hitched. It wasn't just gossip anymore, it was exposure. The cafe went quiet. Then a woman at a nearby table whispered just loud enough for everyone to hear, "That's her, the soldier." Lena clenched her fists, forcing herself to stay calm. She tore the paper down, folded it neatly, and left without a word. Outside, her phone buzzed. It was a text from an unknown number. "Now the whole neighborhood knows who you really are. Maybe they'll think twice before letting a killer live next door. K." Her pulse quickened. For a second, her old instincts kicked in. Locate, trace, react. But she took a deep breath and whispered to herself, "Not this way. Not again." By evening, her porch light flickered. Officer Dan showed up again, concern etched across his face. "Lena, you okay?" "I saw the post online, Karen's behind it." Lena nodded silently. "I figured." She crossed a serious line this time, he said. "That article's from your service record, isn't it?" "Part of it," Lena replied quietly, "but it's missing context. I wasn't responsible for what happened. I saved who I could." Dan's expression softened. "I know, but you need to tell them. Let the truth come from you, not her." Lena sighed. People don't listen to explanations when they've already made up their minds. Dan looked at her for a moment, then said something that stuck with her. "Then, don't explain. Show them who you are." The next day brought chaos. Karen had arranged an emergency HOA meeting claiming it was a safety discussion for community protection, Flyers had gone up overnight with her dramatic touch. No, who lives next door? By the time Lena arrived, the room was full, over 50 neighbors, phones ready, whispering and filming. Karen stood at the podium, pretending to look calm but glowing with triumph inside. "Thank you for coming," she began sweetly. "I know many of you are concerned after the recent revelation. Our HOA values peace and safety, and we have to ask, can we really feel safe living next to someone with a violent past?" Gasps and murmurs rippled through the crowd. Karen gestured toward Lena at the back. "Miss Brooks, perhaps you'd like to explain why your name was in a military incident report?" Lena stepped forward slowly. Every eye followed her. She stood before them, composed, unshaken. "You want the truth?" she asked, her voice echoing in the hall. "Fine, I'll give it to you." The room fell silent. I was a combat instructor. My unit's mission was to rescue civilians trapped in a conflict zone. We saved dozens, but we lost one of our own, my best friend. Her voice wavered for the first time. "I carried her out myself. The explosion that killed her was meant for me." Karen crossed her arms. "Tragic story. But people change, Miss Brooks. Trauma can make someone unpredictable." Lena looked straight at her. "You're right. Trauma does change people. It teaches them patience, discipline, strength." She took a breath. "Everything you've done to me, Karen, the rumors, the shoving, the lies, I endured worse in war zones. I don't break easy, and I don't fight to hurt. I fight to protect." Someone from the audience whispered, "Protect who?" Lena's gaze swept across the room. "Anyone who needs it, even people like her." Karen blinked, confused. Lena continued, her tone steady but powerful. "Because that's what soldiers do. We protect, even when we're hated. We stand guard, even when no one thanks us." The audience began murmuring, but this time, not with fear, with respect. Officer Dan stepped forward from the back, raising his hand. "I served too, and I've checked Lena's record myself. She's clean. She's a decorated veteran who saved lives. If you ask me who I'd trust in an emergency, it'd be her." The applause started slowly, but built until the whole room was clapping again. Karen's composure cracked. "You're all fools. She's manipulating you," she shouted. But her voice was drowned out by the noise. Her control, the thing she'd built her entire identity on, was gone. Lena turned to her one last time. "Karen, you wanted to ruin me, but you just reminded me who I am. Thank you for that." Then she turned and walked out, leaving Karen trembling at the podium, surrounded by the very people who had once worshipped her authority. That night, the neighborhood was quiet again, the same peace as before, but now it felt earned. Lena sat on her porch, the stars bright above her. Mrs. Hines brought over tea, whispering softly, "You changed something around here tonight." Lena smiled faintly. "Maybe. Or maybe I just reminded everyone that strength doesn't always look loud." Dan stopped by, tipping his cap. "You handled that better than any of us could have. You didn't just fight back, you restored some humanity to this place." Lena chuckled softly. "That's all I ever wanted." As they sat in the quiet, a faint breeze rustled through the trees, peaceful, steady, almost healing. But deep inside, Lena knew peace came with a price. And sometimes that price was standing up, not with fists, but with truth. And that night, truth had finally won. The days that followed were strangely quiet. For the first time in years, the HOA chat group, usually buzzing with Karen's reminders and threats, fell silent. Her once daily posts about lawn height, mailbox colors, and recycling bins had vanished overnight. Neighbors noticed. Some said she was too embarrassed to show her face. Others said she'd gone out of town. But Lena knew better. Karen wasn't gone. She was hiding. Across the street, the curtains in her pristine white house remained closed. The front garden, once the neighborhood's pride, was now overgrown with weeds. Newspapers piled up at the edge of the driveway. The woman who had spent years controlling every detail of others' lives couldn't even control her own anymore. And yet, Lena didn't feel joy, not satisfaction, not even revenge, just quiet sorrow. Because no matter what Karen had done, no one deserved to drown alone in their own bitterness. One morning, as Lena jogged past Karen's house, she noticed something strange. The mail slot was jammed with unopened envelopes, some stamped final notice. She hesitated, then sighed. Old habits, she muttered, walking up to the porch and knocking gently. No answer. She tried again. Karen? It's Lena. Still nothing. She was about to leave when she heard a faint rustling from inside, followed by a quiet voice. Go away. Lena paused. I just came to check if you're okay. A long silence. Then, in a trembling voice, Karen said, Why would you care? You got what you wanted. Lena leaned against the doorframe, speaking softly. I didn't want to win, Karen. I just wanted peace. The door cracked open, just enough for Lena to see Karen's face. Her eyes were swollen, her makeup smeared, her once straight hair tangled. You think peace exists after you humiliate someone in front of the entire community? She snapped weakly. Lena met her eyes. You humiliated yourself. I just stopped pretending you were right. Karen flinched at the words. But before she could answer, she suddenly stumbled backward, clutching her head. I haven't eaten since yesterday, she murmured. Lena reacted instantly, stepping forward to catch her before she fell. Hey, easy. Sit down. Karen resisted for a moment, then gave in, too weak to fight. Lena guided her to the couch, glancing around the messy room, dishes scattered, curtains drawn, old pizza boxes piled in corners. The Queen of Perfection was living in chaos. Lena found a bottle of water on the counter and handed it to her. Drink this. Karen took a sip, trembling. Why are you helping me? Lena sighed. Because it's what people do, Karen. You don't have to like me, but you don't have to destroy yourself either. For a long time, Karen just stared at her, the woman she'd spent weeks trying to break. The one person she couldn't intimidate. Finally, in a whisper, she said, You don't know what it's like to lose control of everything. Lena looked at her gently. You'd be surprised. Karen frowned. What do you mean? Lena sat beside her. When I left the military, I didn't know who I was anymore. My whole life had been about discipline, command, control. And when that ended, I felt empty, like I didn't matter unless I was in charge of something. Karen's eyes softened. That's exactly how I feel. This HOA was the only thing I was good at, the only thing that made me feel important. And that's why you kept tightening your grip, Lena said quietly. You weren't protecting the community. You were protecting yourself from being forgotten. Karen's lip quivered. For the first time, her defenses cracked completely. I just wanted people to respect me, she whispered. Lena placed a hand on her shoulder. Respect isn't built on fear. It's built on how you treat people when you have the power to hurt them and choose not to. Tears streamed down Karen's cheeks. She didn't even try to hide them, this time. I messed up, didn't I? She whispered. Lena gave a faint smile. You can fix it. But it starts with saying sorry, not to me, to everyone you hurt. Karen looked down. They won't listen. They will, Lena said softly. People always listen when it's real. The following weekend, the community gathered again, this time for a neighborhood cleanup event that Lena and Officer Dan had organized. Kids were picking up litter, parents trimming hedges, laughter filling the air again. The same streets that once echoed with Karen's complaints now hummed with life. As Lena was handing out gloves and trash bags, she noticed someone standing hesitantly near the gate. Karen. She wore plain clothes this time, no uniform, no clipboard. Just a woman trying to find her place again. The chatter quieted as she approached. Some people crossed their arms, others whispered. But Lena stepped forward, smiling softly. Glad you came. Karen's voice trembled. I wanted to apologize to everyone. The crowd watched as she took a shaky breath. I lost myself trying to control everything. I forgot this community isn't about power, it's about people. I'm sorry for what I did to all of you. And to you, Lena. The air hung still for a moment, then Mrs. Hines smiled gently. Took you long enough, she said, earning a few laughs from the crowd. The tension broke. One by one, neighbors began nodding, some even clapping lightly. Karen's eyes welled up again, but this time with relief. Lena stepped forward, offering her hand. We all make mistakes, Karen. What matters is what we do next. Karen hesitated, then shook it. Thank you, she whispered. Over the next few weeks, things began to change. Karen resigned as HOA president, recommending Lena as her replacement. A move that shocked everyone. But Lena declined. I'm not here to lead. I'm here to live, she said simply. Instead, she helped the community rebuild itself, not with rules, but with trust. Kids painted fences together. Families hosted potlucks. Even Karen started volunteering at the local shelter, quietly trying to make amends. One evening, as the sun dipped low, Lena and Dan stood by the park, watching the neighborhood kids play. You did it, Dan said. You changed this place. Lena smiled faintly. No, we did. Sometimes all it takes is one person to stand up, not with fists, but with grace. Dan nodded. You could have let her drown in her own mess. But you didn't. Lena looked out at the kids, laughter echoing through the air. Because if I did, I'd be no better than the war I escaped. That night, as she sat on her porch under the stars, Karen walked across the street, holding 2 cups of coffee. Peace offering, she said, awkwardly. Lena chuckled, taking one. You finally learned the secret of being a good neighbor. Karen smiled, faintly. What's that? Coffee first, ego later. They both laughed softly, a sound no one would have imagined a few weeks ago. For the first time, the neighborhood felt truly whole again. Not perfect, but human. And as the night breeze whispered through the trees, Lena thought to herself, maybe peace isn't found by avoiding battles, but by knowing when to stop fighting. A soft sunset bathed the neighborhood in golden light. For the first time in months, the air felt light, no shouting, no tension, no fear of another confrontation. Children raced their bikes down the street while their parents waved from porches, chatting instead of complaining. The faint sound of laughter replaced the old noise of arguments. And in the middle of it all sat Lena on her porch swing, gently rocking, a cup of tea in her hand. The calm rhythm of the creaking chains felt like the slow, steady heartbeat of peace. Across the street, Karen was kneeling by her flower beds, planting bright, yellow marigolds, the same kind Lena had once planted on her first week here. Their eyes met for a moment. No words were exchanged, but a quiet understanding passed between them. Forgiveness didn't need an audience. It just needed courage. Dan strolled over from the sidewalk, wiping his hands on his jeans. Hard to believe this is the same street, huh? Lena smiled softly. Peace has a strange way of growing once you stop watering hate. He nodded. You gave them more than peace. You gave them something to believe in again. She shook her head gently. No, Dan. They found that themselves. I just reminded them what respect looks like. Later that evening, the HOA community gathered for a simple outdoor barbecue. No agendas, no complaints. Just neighbors sharing food, music, and laughter under string lights that swayed in the cool evening breeze. The smell of grilled corn and burgers filled the air. Karen walked up to the group, nervously, holding a tray of homemade cookies. A few heads turned, but instead of the awkward silence she feared, Mrs. Hines waved her over. Well, don't just stand there, honey. Grab a plate before the kids eat, everything. Karen chuckled, visibly relieved. She spotted Lena sitting near the fire pit and walked over. I brought cookies. Lena smiled. You're braver than you think. Karen raised an eyebrow. For baking cookies? For showing up, Lena said, that's the hardest part. Karen looked at the ground for a moment before asking quietly, you really forgave me? Lena nodded. Yes, not because you earned it, but because I needed to let it go. Holding grudges is like carrying bricks, heavy and useless. Karen's eyes shimmered. You could have ruined me, you know. You had the whole town on your side. Lena looked toward the horizon where the last light of day faded into violet. Justice isn't about revenge. It's about doing what's right, even when no one's watching. For a moment, Karen said nothing. Then she whispered, You're not like anyone I've ever met. Lena smiled faintly. That's the point, Karen. None of us are. As night fell, the neighborhood's laughter echoed into the dark, a living symbol of second chances. Kids roasted marshmallows. Teenagers played guitar. And for once, the HOA president wasn't barking orders, she was clapping along. Lena stood, a little apart, watching the flickering firelight dance across the faces of the people who once looked at her with fear. She could almost hear her father's voice in her head. A true soldier doesn't fight to win. She fights so others can live in peace. That voice had once guided her through battlefields filled with chaos. Now it guided her through something far quieter, but just as powerful: forgiveness. Dan joined her, handing her soda. You know, if anyone deserves a medal in this neighborhood, it's you. She laughed softly. I've had enough medals to last a lifetime. I'll settle for peace of mind. He chuckled. Fair enough. But still, you've done more good here than most people do in a lifetime. Lena looked at the fire, the neighbors, the laughter, and smiled. Maybe that's what we're all meant to do, Dan. Heal something, even if it's just a little corner of the world. Later that night, when the crowd dispersed and the lights dimmed, Lena stayed behind for a moment. The air smelled of smoke and warm summer grass. She looked up at the stars, countless tiny lights scattered across the endless black. She whispered quietly, Maya, we did it. I kept my promise. I didn't fight this time, not with fists, but with heart. The wind stirred gently, rustling the leaves. It felt like an answer. As she turned to leave, she spotted Karen lingering near the fire pit, staring into the glowing embers. For a brief moment, Lena walked over and placed a hand on her shoulder. You okay? Karen nodded slowly. For the first time in a long time, yeah, I think I am. Lena smiled, then walked away, her footsteps light, her heart finally at peace. Movie camera final monologue for the audience/narrator moment. Sometimes the strongest fights aren't the ones you win with fists, they're the ones you win by walking away. By forgiving someone who doesn't deserve it. By showing grace when anger would have been easier. Karen thought strength came from control. But real strength comes from compassion, from knowing your worth, even when the world doubts you. We all have a Karen in our lives, someone who pushes us to the edge, who tests our patience, who tries to make us small. But if you take anything from this story, let it be this: don't let their darkness dim your light. Rise above it. Show them what real strength looks like. The screen slowly fades to black as Lena's voice softens into the outro line. Because kindness isn't weakness. It's power in its purest form. Hey, everyone watching, if this story touched your heart today, tell me this: what does real strength mean to you? Drop your answer in the comments. I read every single one. And before you go, make sure to subscribe and turn on that notification bell, because next week's story will remind you why karma always finds its way home. Stay kind, stay strong, and I'll see you in next story.